40 years out of a EV battery. Must be clickbait, right? Well, I've been doing a deep dive on the subject, and it's actually probably more likely than you think. First of all, the batteries have been outperforming the expectations or the predictions of the manufacturers, and that's pretty well known now. A lot of the early predictions about batteries having to be replaced on a regular basis, or people running into a lot of problems, I mean, they just haven't materialized. But let me back up a little bit and just talk about the current recommendations and expectations for batteries. So most, if not all, manufacturers are recommending that users keep their battery to a maximum charge range most of the time at about 80%. And at the low end, they don't want you to drain them down to 0% or even below 20% for the most case. Those recommendations, I think, and they are right. They're generally absolutely correct. But I think they're correct in simplification. The manufacturers know that they have to communicate a simple message to the public in order to have it understood. The subtleties and the nuance involved in battery chemistry and charging rates and all those kinds of things, they just complicate the message. So the simple message between 20 and 80 is the one that generally gets broadcast. But there's a lot of research that has been done into these technologies. They've developed a lot in the last decade or so, and the real world road experience of the average EV user has actually proven to be more successful than even the manufacturers have predicted. They've erred on the side of caution, which I think is probably a good idea. So if we dare get a little more into the weeds, looking at battery chemistry and what the pitfalls and the problems are, in general, it's the extremes that are the problem, and you get issues with batteries that are operate outside of preferred ranges of temperature and charge. So, as we all know, batteries in EVs don't like to work very well when they're exceptionally cold, and they don't like to work very well when they're exceptionally hot. So, those are the extremes that you want to avoid. In a nutshell, although it's a little more complicated than that, operated outside these extremes, you get cracking on the this. I guess they're calling it a cracking or fissures on the cells themselves. Electrons, ions, whatever they are, kind of stick to the sides, and they interrupt the optimal performance of your standard batteries. And generally that's true. What doesn't get promoted quite as much is how happy batteries are to operate in a middle range. And I'm just going to, for simplicity, say at 50%. The entire battery performance exists on a spectrum, so the battery performance is not as good, and damage can occur at the lower end of the spectrum, and similarly you can get damage and lower performance at the higher end of the spectrum. So the middle, sort of like Mama Bear in the middle, is kind of where you want your battery to live. So that being the case, I've been doing some reading and doing a little experimentation myself, and found that, or I guess I'm going to suggest another tactic outside of the maximum 80, minimum 20 suggestion or recommendation. If your average daily travel is around, let's say, 20% a day, so you use up 20% of your battery range within a day, I'm going to suggest that you start at 50% and you charge half of that, above 10% in this case, up to 60%. You use the battery, you use your 20%, it goes down to 40, you come home at the end of the day and you plug it in. Now, of course, this only works if you have a plug-in charger. Ideally, perhaps a level 2 charger at home. may not work so well for people that live in apartments or don't have access to charging at home. So what you've got to have 20% range right in around where the battery likes to live. And research has shown, and in fact there's a semi-local link to this research. I'm in Sydney, Nova Scotia, and one of the top battery chemists in the world actually teaches at Dalhousie University in Halifax. So Jeff Dunn is his name, and he's done extensive research. I believe he currently now works for Tesla, and they are working on the development of a 1,000,000-mile battery. So if you go through his research, I think what some of these papers have stated is that the battery ranges can easily exceed current expectations, especially if you stay within that Goldilocks zone. The Goldilocks zone within whatever your driving range is of 50% of your battery charge. Now, that's not to say that you can't charge it more. Obviously you can. The manufacturers are absolutely correct in saying that there's very minimal long-term damage that happens up to 80%. But what they're not saying is that there's almost no damage whatsoever that happens to your battery if you live in that middle range in around 50%. And that batteries love to be charged on a daily basis. So if you know what your expectation is and you know what you need to be able to get out of your battery during the day, you can dramatically increase the lifespan of your battery by staying in that Goldilocks zone. And 40 years of battery life is not just possible, but according to some of this research, is actually likely. And it's not to say that you can't charge above if you're going on a trip, or it can't dip into lower values if it need be. But if you are able to stay in that range, you get the benefit of having exceptionally little, if almost no, degradation to your battery whatsoever. So there are some people that this will not work for. People that do intermittent driving or long trip driving on their EVs. Again, the batteries are tested in that standard range of up to 80%, and if you need to live in that range, you're really not at fault or will have any issues within the medium to long term. But if you're looking at an exceptionally long-term life for your battery, and who wouldn't really want that, staying in that Goldilocks zone, that seems to be the ticket to a miraculous 40-year lifespan for your EV battery.